On December 14, 1999, a single phone call echoed through the halls of Charles Schulz's quiet Santa Rosa studio, bringing to a shuddering halt a half-century of creativity that had touched the hearts of millions around the world. In that instant, the gentle click of a receiver became a thunderclap, shocking fans who believed Peanuts would live on forever. The man known as Sparky, who had never missed a single day of drawing since he was 5 years old, was found weeping at his drawing board, whispering, "I'm done." How did one telephone exchange end the adventures of Charlie Brown, Snoopy, and the rest of the gang in a single night? More than just the end of a beloved comic strip, that phone call was the climax of a lifetime of triumph and heartbreak, perfectionism and perseverance. To understand why those simple words carried such weight, we need to travel back to the very first spark of inspiration in a small barbershop apartment, where a young boy named Charles Schulz found solace in pencil and paper amid the turmoil of the Great Depression. From there, we'll follow the twists and turns of his journey, moments of soaring success and crushing disappointment, until we reach that final call. In December 1999, Charles Schulz was 76 years old, his health failing as steadily as his hand trembled. Chemotherapy had weakened him. Strokes had stolen his vision, and doctors had delivered a prognosis no artist ever truly prepares for: "You will never draw again." Those were not mere words to a man whose identity was bound up in every line he put on the page. For nearly 5 decades, Sparky had created Peanuts every single day, working through vacations, holidays, even his mother's death, and the horrors of war. A telephone call confirming that his career was over felt like someone pulling the final piece from a foundation he had built since childhood. But the phone call itself was not random. It came from his syndicate, the United Features editor he had wrestled with year after year over contract terms and creative rights. They'd arranged a health check to assess whether Peanuts could continue under ghost artists or automated cursive pens. When Sparky answered, a hush passed through the studio. His line of sight was blurred. His hands betrayed him. The editor delivered the news with clinical precision, an uncertainty hanging in the silence before the words tumbled out. "Charles, we need to talk about moving forward without you." That single phrase ignited decades of unspoken anxiety. Schulz had once drawn 90 strips in a week to buy a home for his young family. He had insisted on absolute control, even when CBS tried to make Snoopy more marketable, or a syndicate manager picked the cruel name Peanuts without asking. He fought tooth and nail for every nuance, whether Linus could quote the Bible, which charities to support, even how Franklin should appear beside Lucy. His demand: "Either you print it exactly as I draw it, or you don't print it at all," had been both his shield and his burden. To relinquish the pen never crossed his mind until now. In that moment, mistaking the calm voice on the other end for another round of negotiations, Schulz whispered back, "I'm done." The words hung in the air, like chalk dust settling on a Sunday comic page. He didn't say, "I quit," or "Let's revise this contract." He said, "I'm done," as if acknowledging the final brushstroke on a canvas that had already been declared a masterpiece. And for millions of readers, it was the last time they would see new sketches of a boy perpetually trying to kick a football, a dog dreaming of flying, and a psychiatrist threatening Booth run by a precocious 6-year-old. From Sparky's earliest wanders around Gordon Elementary in St. Paul, he'd felt out of place. Too small, too quiet, too imaginative. His classmates might have seen a shy child who stuttered through afternoons, spent grading art assignments by candlelight, but he learned that loneliness breeds empathy, and empathy breeds comic strips. that speak to every outsider's heart. He channeled that awareness into Charlie Brown's perennial bad luck, Lucy's attempted psychiatry, Linus's security blanket, and Snoopy's impossible flights of fancy. Through every setback, failed school yearbook submissions, editor rejections, wartime trauma, Schulz drew. On his return from Europe, he wrestled with nightmares and the urge to quit life itself. But he kept scribbling. When the Minneapolis Tribune killed his early strip La Folks, he repitched to United Features, fighting for the right to name his creation Charlie Brown, rather than accept a list-generated label. When merchandising offers threatened to dilute Snoopy's essence, he refused millions, insisting that his characters would remain exactly as he had drawn them. But decades of perfectionism leave scars as deep as any battlefield. By the late 1990s, the tremor in his hand was so pronounced that lines shook across the page. Agrarian newsprint was shrinking. Fewer newspapers carried Peanuts each year. Rumors circulated about ghost artists waiting in the wings. A tiny spark of doubt settled in his mind, grown from years of insisting on absolute control over a world that would never be his to change. And so, on that cold December evening, when the editor's voice sounded more distant than usual, Sparky understood the truth. He had been denying his career was not eternal. In a single breath, he acknowledged the end of Peanuts, and of himself as an artist in the purest sense. "I'm done." 3 words that bristled with sorrow, exhaustion, and reluctant acceptance. What happened after that call sent shockwaves far beyond the studio walls. Newspapers pored over the farewell strip, television anchors replayed clips of Charlie Brown stumbling, Linus lecturing, and Snoopy dreaming. Fans wept as if losing an old friend. Collectors snapped up vinyl originals, and Charles Schulz himself, clutching the receiver long after the line went dead, sat still amid his drawings, the weight of half a century pressing on him at last. The morning after that fateful call, the Santa Rosa studio felt heavier than ever. A pale sun climbed over the redwoods, illuminating rows of inked sketches pinned to the walls. Snoopy perched atop his doghouse, Lucy bellowing, "The doctor is in." Charlie Brown's striped shirt perfectly drawn, Linus clutching his blanket. Each panel, once alive with laughter and longing, now seemed frozen in time. Schulz sat at his easel long after dawn, staring at a half-finished strip, the pencil hovering in midair. It was as if reality had slowed to match the tremor in his hand. He traced the curves of Snoopy's ear again and again, searching for the comfort he once felt in simple lines. But that comfort was gone. Instead, an emptiness spread across his chest the way spilled ink staining white paper. Word of his retirement swept across the cartooning world like wildfire. Newspapers printed the terse statement, "Charles Schulz announces end of Peanuts, effective immediately," alongside nostalgic montages of his early work. Headlines riffed on Charlie Brown's perennial losses. "Good grief, it's over," or "Peanuts takes its final bow." Online message boards blossomed with tributes and heartbreak. Fans shared screen captures of their favorite strips, debating which moment best captured Schulz's genius. Parents remembered reading Sunday comics with their children decades ago. New parents read them now, hoping to glimpse the magic that had shaped generations. Collectors scrambled to buy original art from galleries and auction houses. In Los Angeles, a small museum devoted to comic strips held a candlelit vigil, with attendees dressed as Peanuts characters. Someone placed a single red blanket at the foot of Snoopy's statue, a silent symbol of Linus's comfort in troubled times. Meanwhile, industry insiders speculated about the future of Peanuts. Would United Features syndicate ghost artists to continue the strip? Could artificial intelligence replicate Sparky's distinctive line work? Some newspapers began to quietly test reruns labeled Classic Peanuts, tweaking fonts and resizing panels, while others announced they'd drop the strip altogether, rather than run unauthorized new episodes. The very idea of a new Peanuts became controversial, an affront to the sanctity of Sparky's vision. Cartoonists across the country weighed in, writing op-eds about artistic integrity, creative control, and the perilous balance between legacy and exploitation. In one pointed essay, a Pulitzer winner warned that continuing Peanuts without Schulz at the helm would reduce the strip to corporate fan fiction, hollow of humor and heart. Inside Schulz's home, the atmosphere remained hushed and reverent. His wife, Jane, gently encouraged him to rest, to let the pens and brushes lie untouched for a while. Their daughter Meredith brought family photos and old scrapbooks, hoping to rekindle memories that might bring solace. But every image of a younger Sparky radiated a fervent energy that felt unreachable now, even the occasional laughter at a shared anecdote. The time Schulz accidentally drew Snoopy with a tail like a bull, or the day he fell off an office chair while pitching a new TV special, only underscored the ache of absence. He smiled politely, then returned to the studio, trailing the soft clack of his cane on the hardwood floor. As winter turned to spring, reruns filled the newspaper pages and vintage TV specials cycled on cable channels. The World Rediscovered, A Charlie Brown Christmas, It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, and A Boy Named Charlie Brown, each viewing tinged with bittersweet reflection. Critics revisited the strips through new lenses. Psychoanalysts analyzed Lucy's Booth as a satirical critique of pop psychology. Sociologists praised Franklin's debut as a milestone in comic strip integration. Historians praised Schulz's wartime service as shaping Charlie Brown's eternal underdog status. Even educators brought Peanuts into classrooms, using Linus's blanket as an entry point to discuss childhood psychology. Peanuts scholarship flourished, with academic conferences and journal articles exploring themes of failure, resilience, and the quest for belonging. Yet, for all this renewed analysis, no one could replicate Schulz's alchemy of simplicity and profundity. His characters had emerged from the quiet hum of his childhood. The barber shop's buzzing clippers, the wartime sirens over Europe, the isolation of his art instruction school. Every hardship lent depth to his work. Every loss informed Charlie Brown's soft, spoken struggles. Every triumph colored a strip's gentle triumph. With no possibility of new material, the world treasured each existing panel more dearly. An eternal snapshot of empathy drawn in black and white. By the time of his funeral in February 2000, memorial services had been organized from Tokyo to Paris, from Toronto to Sydney. Fans left flowers at Schulz's gravesite, stacked old newspapers in tribute, and wrote letters thanking him for giving voice to the insecurities of quiet kids everywhere. Yet none of this homage could fill the void left by that final phone call. The studio remained as Schulz had left it, brushes set in plastic cups, fresh discs of Bristol board waiting to be sketched, a small framed photo of his mother smiling on the corner of his desk. The room, preserved like a time capsule, was both a shrine and a reminder that art, once severed from the artist's hand, cannot truly continue. But long before that final chapter, Peanuts sprang to life in the quiet corners of a boy's imagination, shaped by hardships few cartoonists ever faced. Charles Schulz's earliest memories of Sarajevo, sized sadness, were drawn in pencil on scrap paper tucked between barber shop jackets during the Great Depression. His mother kept a small pile of blank cards so he could sketch to chase away hunger and fear, while his father's clippers buzzed reminders of an uncertain future. In those cramped quarters above the shop, Young Sparky first gave voice to a world where small worries overshadowed grand ambitions, planting the seeds of Charlie Brown's eternal underdog spirit. When Ripley's Believe It or Not published his drawing of Spike at age 14, Schulz felt the thrill of recognition for the first time. Yet that triumph was tempered by classmates who mocked his talents and teachers who dismissed his art as frivolous. Those jabs shaped his view of success. It could be exhilarating, but it never guaranteed acceptance. He channeled those conflicting emotions into Charlie Brown's foiled attempts at the kite-eating tree, his fumbling efforts to kick a football, and his stiff hope under the yellow, striped shirt. Each panel bore the quiet echo of a boy who learned early that winning didn't always mean belonging. By the late 1940s, having survived wartime Europe and the loss of his mother, Schulz returned to the U.S. with a trove of sketches and a perseverance forged under fire. He enrolled in mail-order art courses, scribbling by candlelight when bills redirected electricity away from his family's apartment. To pay for supplies, he graded student sketches by day, his own dreams penciled in the margins. That dual life, teacher and pupil, critic and cartoonist, laid the foundation for Peanuts' authenticity. Viewers glimpsed it whenever Linus clutched his blanket like an anchor, or Lucy's psychiatric booth dispensed wisdom, sifted through Schulz's own therapy sessions. When Peanuts debuted in 7 newspapers on October 2, 1950, Schulz earned a modest $90 that first month. In interviews, he'd recall that initial thrill as a longed for whisper finally heard. Yet he recoiled at the name, Peanuts, a moniker handed to him by a list-toting syndicate clerk who had never read a single strip. He never truly forgave them, but he persevered, driven by the conviction that the joy or despair etched into his characters would transcend any awkward label. Within 2 years, the strip leapt to 40 papers. By 1958, it appeared in 355 U.S. outlets and 38 overseas. The meteoric climb was a testament to authenticity. Readers saw their own quiet struggles, reflected in Charlie Brown's shy smile, Snoopy's private triumphs, and Sally's exasperation at her big brother's glum outlook. Success brought its own battles. When Ford offered a multi-million-dollar deal in 1959, Schulz hesitated, wary of diluting Snoopy into mere mascot. He refused any adaptation that compromised his vision, even if it meant turning down revenues that could have outpaced his cartooning salary. As merchandise racks filled with plush toys and greeting cards, Schulz guarded every nuance: Snoopy's floppy ears, Woodstock's tiny talons, Peppermint Patty's untamed ginger curls. He believed that true magic lay in those imperfections, the quirks that made each character feel alive. Warner Bros. Animators learned that lesson the hard way when Schulz halted production mid-air on a holiday special, demanding Snoopy's ears be redrawn to match a single ink blot he had famously sketched decades earlier. At the same time, Schulz used his platform to navigate cultural currents. 11 days after Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, Franklin Armstrong first joined the gang, a move that cost Schulz letters from angry editors in the South, but reinforced his ethos. Representation matters, even in 6-frame panels. He weathered editorials decrying Linus's blanket as psychological crutch, sued lawyers over bootleg strips gone rancid with adult jokes, and negotiated fiercely with syndicates threatening to shrink his creative control. Each skirmish read like another lost football kick, a test of resolve that, when overcome, reaffirmed the power of perseverance central to Peanuts' heart. Through the 1960s and 70s, Schulz balanced blockbuster specials like A Charlie Brown Christmas with art, world controversies over plagiarism, ghost artists, and the boundaries of intellectual property. He held firm against everyone from corporate moguls to fellow cartoonists. insisting that Peanuts remain exactly as he drew it. That fierce dedication carved a legacy of authenticity that still resonates. Today, artists cite his minimal lines and emotional depth as brushes that painted the landscape of modern satire, while educators use Charlie Brown's persistent optimism to teach resilience. In therapy rooms, Linus's blanket became shorthand for transitional objects, a testament to Schulz's intuitive grasp of universal fears. Yet no biographer can fully capture the trembling hands that traced each panel until the day those hands could trace no more. The tremor was the second unwelcome legacy of a half-century under deadline pressure, and it distilled the inevitability of that fateful phone call. When the syndicate broached the subject of drawing Peanuts without its creator, Schulz felt the culmination of every sacrifice: days skipped without family, vacations forsaken, holidays spent hunched over a drawing board. He considered it a betrayal of the discipline and love that kept his characters real. And so, with a voice cracked by emotion and fatigue, he whispered into the receiver, "I'm done." But even as he relinquished the pen, Schulz's influence only deepened. New generations discovered Charlie Brown's gallant attempts at hope, Lucy's candid critiques, and Snoopy's boundless imagination. Street artists stenciled Woodstock on freeway overpasses, entrepreneurs launched Linus-inspired therapy apps, and satellites beamed digital Snoopy faces across the globe to commemorate NASA's safety mascot. Peanuts became a global mirror, reflecting humanity's tiny victories and vast insecurities. And though no fresh pencil lines would ever grace newspapers, the eternal loop of reruns, specials, and scholarly conferences ensured that Schulz's vision continued to whisper truths, no longer confined to 12 panels a week. Even after he relinquished the pen, the spirit of Peanuts radiated across every corner of the globe, as if each published rerun and holiday special breathed life into characters Schulz once sketched by hand. Streets in Santa Rosa lined shop windows with Charlie Brown snow globes and Snoopy plush dolls. Fan conventions in Tokyo, Paris, and Sao Paulo celebrated his work with life-size cutouts and cosplay. The final Sunday strip and his passing in February 2000 became public moments of mourning, reminding millions that although no new lines would ever emerge, the simple warmth of those panels would endure. As discussions unfolded on talk shows and social media, new fans discovered black and white panels brimming with universal truths, and scholars dissected how a zigzag line could capture the human condition. Inside the studio, where Sparky had spent countless hours bending pencil to paper, silence settled like ink drying on a fresh board. On February 13, 2000, the last Sunday strip appeared in newspapers worldwide, featuring Snoopy at his typewriter penning, "Dear friends," a farewell note that resonated with Collective H. At Schulz's funeral a week later, there were no grand eulogies extolling genius, just heartfelt stories from family and colleagues who spoke of a man whose vulnerabilities became the bedrock of everyone's most beloved comic. Friends recalled his self-deprecating chuckle, his gentle insistence on simplicity, and his belief that earnestness transcended cynicism. Floral wreaths shaped like Peanuts characters carpeted the aisles as fans bid farewell to the creator, who taught them that every small worry mattered. 2 years later, the Charles M. Schulz Museum opened its doors in Santa Rosa, intending to celebrate 50 years of pencil strokes and woven narratives. Early exhibits showcased original blue pencils, typewritten scripts, and Schulz's hand-scrawled annotations revising dialogue. Admiration later turned to debate after David McCease's 2007 biography alleged secret vices and murky psychoses, igniting a rift between devoted fans and the Schulz family's protectors. Critics demanded transparency, while relatives insisted private pain. never diminished the purity of Sparky's vision. The museum became ground zero for this dialogue. Does one honor the art in isolation? Or must one also question the artist? Interactive panels, inviting fan reflections, diverged into impassioned commentaries on the frailty of creative genius, transforming the museum into a forum for collective moral reckoning. Beneath all dispute lay an unshakable truth. Peanuts had transcended print. NASA had adopted Snoopy as its official safety mascot, commissioning patches featuring the Beagle in flight gear, while national landmarks displayed giant inflatable Snoopy figures on special occasions. Fashion houses released Snoopy-themed sneakers, and Michelin star chefs garnished desserts with edible Snoopy silhouettes. In virtual realms, video games ported Charlie Brown's adventures to handheld screens, and blockchain artists minted digital Peanuts art as NFTs. Fragments of Peanuts fabric stitched into quilts carried stories across continents. From roadside billboards in Mumbai to subway banners in London, Schulz's sketches whispered that simple lines could bridge cultures, proving that a dog on a doghouse could unite strangers in shared laughter and introspection. Schulz's legacy rippled through halls of academia and the ateliers of aspiring cartoonists alike. University courses dissected each panel for its mastery of timing and tonal contrast, while students practiced his deceptively effortless line work, learning that precision born from constraint often yields poetic imagery. Therapists used Linus's blanket as case studies in attachment theory, and literacy programs employed Peanut strips to foster reading fluency in diverse classrooms. Comic festivals held Draw Like Schulz competitions, challenging participants to capture that blend of whimsy and sincerity. Graphic novelists cited him as the progenitor of modern minimalist storytelling, while podcasters debated the psychology of Lucy's Booth. Did it alleviate anxieties or amplify them? Across creative fields, Sparky's blueprint stood as proof that profound resonance can be etched in modest frames. Ultimately, the story of Peanuts is more than nostalgia. It is a parable of resilience, creative ownership, and the human condition. Schulz taught us that embracing vulnerability can yield universal connection, that perfectionism wrapped in compassion resonates deeper than slick novelty. His insistence on control, once a point of contention, now stands as a landmark in safeguarding artistic integrity. And his final words, "I'm done," reverberate not as defeat, but as acceptance of the natural arc from draft to legacy. In a world racing toward digital ephemera, those simple, hand-drawn panels remind us to pause, observe, and find beauty in the understated. They encourage every quiet voice to speak, every small joy to matter, just as Sparky intended. Even as the ink dried on Schulz's final strip, the echoes of that last phone call reverberated through living rooms, offices, and schools around the world. In kitchens where parents once laughed at Charlie Brown's misadventures, a hush settled as families realized no new six-frame panels would ever appear. On commuter trains, commuters thumbed through Sunday editions with trembling fingers, pausing on Snoopy's jaunty pride and Linus's solemn grip on a well-worn blanket. Rarely has a single moment in media history so perfectly bridged private grief and public mourning. The simple syllables, "I'm done," served both as an end credit flourish and as a mirror, reflecting every reader's own farewells, regrets, and moments of unexpected finality. Inside colleges and coffee houses, cartooning students clutched notepads against chest, mourning the loss of a living legend, and pledging to carry forward his gifts of economy and empathy. Writers compared Schulz's departure to Hemingway's final farewell or Kafka's unfinished manuscripts, an abrupt severance that magnified what remains unsaid. As cultural critics dissected the moment, they noted the contrast between Schulz's gentle resignation and today's incessant chase for more content, more sequels, more iterations. In a world that rarely stops, "I'm done" sounded like a courageous act of acceptance, the bravest kind of blank page, one that honors limits rather than forcing unearned continuations. That tension between legacy and closure became a touchstone for artists across disciplines. Musicians sampled Peanuts' theme music in farewell concerts. Theater troupes staged live readings of Schulz's earliest strips. Filmmakers included Snoopy cameos in documentaries about creative burnout. Every homage underscored a shared realization. An artist's greatest triumph might be knowing when to step away. Peanuts reached its peak not by endless proliferation, but by preserving the quiet power of a simple line. In relinquishing control at the very end, Schulz preserved the sanctity of his creation more thoroughly than any contract clause could. Philosophers and psychologists saw deeper meaning in that telephone exchange. "I'm done" became shorthand for the human condition, a reminder that fulfillment and exhaustion often rest on the same fragile fulcrum. Schulz's lifetime habit of drawing every single day, through depression, through health crisis, through loss, symbolized our collective drive to create meaning. Yet the final call revealed another truth: creativity is not infinite. Even the most devoted artist must confront vulnerability. And when Sparky's pen fell silent, it allowed audiences to confront their own vanishing points, to appreciate that every story requires an ending, and every artist a rest. And yet, the magic of Peanuts didn't vanish with new strips. Parents continued to read Charlie Brown comics to children, marveling that his gentle defeats remain more uplifting than most victories. Therapists still invoke Linus's blanket in sessions on attachment. Teachers staple Lucy's Booth cartoons into writing assignments about voice and tone. Graphic novelists cite Schulz's minimalist frames as the gold standard for pacing. Animators study Snoopy's expressive ears to learn nonverbal storytelling. Through inyo of panels and rewrites of scenes, creators keep the spirit of Peanuts alive, trading in that economy of emotion Schulz pioneered. His legacy lives in every quiet moment that finds its way onto the page. As we look ahead, we carry forward two essential lessons from Sparky's final act. First, that artistic control can be simultaneously a shield and a prison. Fierce protection of a vision must sometimes yield to the forces of time and health. Second, that the most enduring works are those grounded in empathy, created by honoring small sorrows and simple wonders. Peanuts endures because it speaks to the child in each of us who worries about homework, heartbreak, or kicking unseen obstacles. When Schulz pronounced, "I'm done," he gave himself permission to let go, and in doing so, gave us permission to cherish every line he ever drew. Even today, more than 2 decades after that fateful phone call, "I'm done" still echoes through the corridors of creative culture as a sober reminder that every story, no matter how beloved, must reach its final page. When Charles Schulz spoke those 3 words into the receiver, he not only ended a comic strip, but also issued a challenge to honor the integrity of the work we love, by knowing when to let it rest. In the years since, Peanuts has been reprinted countless times, analyzed in dozens of academic journals, and aired in retrospectives on every major network. Yet no amount of reruns or scholarly debate can replace the quiet power of new pencil strokes laid down by the hand of the artist himself. That realization drives home the preciousness of each moment when we create, consume, or share art in real time. Within the larger tapestry of pop culture, Schulz's exit underscores a rare form of creative courage. The choice to step away with dignity, rather than chase endless sequels, live shows, or rebooted franchises. While modern media often demands perpetual churn, spinning off spin-offs, remastering archives, or resurrecting dead brands. Schulz chose to preserve the magic of his world in its purest form. By refusing to authorize ghost artists or computerize continuations, he etched a contract between himself and his audience. One that said, "This is the story I intended, and nothing more." In doing so, he invited readers everywhere to accept closure as part of the human experience, rather than fear it as a void. For aspiring artists, writers, and innovators, that final phone call offers a profound lesson in balance. Too often, creative people fall into the trap of believing that longevity alone validates their work. Instead, Schulz reminds us that authenticity, consistency, and self-respect carry more weight than unlimited output. Each panel of Peanuts was delivered daily, punctually, and with unwavering dedication. Yet he recognized that when the craft became an impediment to health and fulfillment, it was time to bow out gracefully. In a world where more so often trumps good, Sparky's retirement stands as an act of integrity, knowing when more would only diminish the very quality that made the strip resonate. Culturally, the legacy of "I'm Done" extends beyond cartoonists and comic strip enthusiasts. It resonates with anyone who has ever faced burnout, illness, or the creeping sense that a closing chapter is imminent. Physicians, nurses, and first responders have cited Schulz's story when discussing the importance of setting boundaries. CEOs and entrepreneurs reference his decision in conversations about sustainable work rates. Teachers and parents invoke Peanuts when guiding children through the natural cycles of beginning, flourishing, and ending. That universality, that bridge between a six-frame comic and real-life struggle, is the true testament to Schulz's genius. Of course, endings can be bittersweet. Fans mourned the cessation of new strips. Colleagues lamented the loss of a creative force they believed would draw indefinitely. And yet, in that very bittersweetness lies a gift, the chance to revisit old pages with fresh eyes, to rediscover insights long overlooked, and to pass them along to new generations. Charlie Brown's persistent hope, Lucy's misguided confidence, Linus's thoughtful vulnerability, and Snoopy's gleeful imagination continue to speak to readers, facing their own hurdles. Every reprint carries the weight of history and the spark of possibility, reminding us that even nostalgia can be forward looking when it comes from a place of genuine feeling. As we close this exploration of the phone call that ended Peanuts, it becomes clear that Schulz's true masterpiece was not merely a comic strip, but a philosophy of creation. He taught us that dedication must be tempered by self-care, that perfectionism demands boundaries, and that sometimes the bravest thing an artist can do is to know when to hang up the phone. When we remember Sparky's final words, we're not just recalling a career's end. We're honoring a commitment to authenticity, a respect for the creative process, and a profound understanding of the human heart. In the end, that three-word declaration, simple, sorrowful, absolute, offers the final lesson of Peanuts that every journey, like every comic strip, is meant to be read fully, appreciated deeply, and then, with grace, brought to a close.